we'll unmute you so that we can have, the best dialogue we can during these sessions. Let me, if there are any questions at all throughout this, just raise your hand and we'll get to you right away. So turning now to this foundation slide, I just want to hear from just a couple of you. What keywords come to mind when you hear the phrase globalization, just to kind of warm us up? So if you hear globalization, it's sort of an overall, maybe abstract word. What comes to mind just immediately? And you'll have to raise your hands. Or I'll call on you. Who am I going to? Oh, good. We have Jennifer and Julie and May. Okay, Julie, why don't you start? So we have to unmute. Can I unmute?
Hi.
Oh, I can.
So I don't really have a solid definition of globalization, but what comes to mind when I hear that is just the sharing of cultures and the expansion of travel and how that has grown over the years, and being able to share the people and cultures and languages of people like all around the world, sort of my own definition.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of integration, you said culture, language, very, very, very important concepts. Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. Jennifer? And I think, oh, I have control of the mute too. Good.
I was just thinking about opening your consciousness to think about how the world operates as larger than your own community, as one take on it.
Excellent. Yes. That's in terms of understanding others' perspectives, that's definitely something we're going to be talking quite a lot about. May, did you want to, I know you had your hand up before, do you want to say anything? Oh, I think you may be muted.
Hello?
Okay, good.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add outside of what, was it Julie and Jennifer just said? So really, yeah, just a continuation of that concept of open borders, cross-cultural communication, cooperation, which I think is very important when it comes to globalization. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. May, and then while I have you, so the process of globalization has accelerated. Can you think of any reason? These are really basic, but can you think of any reason why the process of globalization has accelerated in the last 20 to 30 years? Because we will be talking about how, this really has been going on for thousands and thousands of years, but what's different about the last few decades?
Well, I think there was someone who said they had sort of indicated they had done studies in anthropology, so I think they could definitely give a different perspective. But I think there's, I think when countries enter into massive trade deals and things like that, there's the offset of that is that the people within those countries that are doing these deals become much more interested because there's more access to other countries. So you get this interested travel, especially, from being from Australia, which is a very isolated country. You get more interest in, the Asias and the Americas and exploring into Europe. So I think there's that. Media, I would say, global media would be a huge influence.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else want to speak to that? Why has it accelerated? I think May's hit on two really important points. Let me see. Oh,
Michelle?
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yes, definitely the internet is the reason why globalization has accelerated in the last 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, I think that's an enormous one. I mean, sort of what shipping did, in the hundreds of years ago to planes, and now with internet making everything much more accessible it's been incredible to watch this. Great. And then we also see, we'll talk a little bit, financial services, which has been sort of, so much is ridden on the infrastructure of technology, but financial services being more integrated has also enabled more commerce in the world. So it's been very extraordinary. I think that we have, this globalization nowadays is sort of the water that we're swimming in because it is so ever present. And I know you received, or will receive, a copy of the Nyan Chanda book, which can be a bit academic, I know, but if you ever do have time to read the first couple chapters, I think we asked you to read the last several. But it's interesting, those first few chapters give you a perspective of globalization literally from millions of years ago to thousands of years ago. So I find it kind of comforting to think about, well, this has been a process that has been trudging along ever since humanity started, and it's fascinating to see the effects when it is so accelerated now. Okay, I'm going to move on. In terms of, in a moment, I'll ask you what are some examples of the ways that society has been affected by globalization and what perspectives resonate with you per the next question. But just think a little bit about that as I go through some of these definitions of globalization. You've all already hit on several of these concepts. So it's closer contact because of internet, because of transportation, because all of the communication vehicles allow us to have increasingly closer contacts, and now we have our WeChat and WhatsApp, and even more instantaneous than phone and text and email. These changes in communications, transportation, computer technology have made us more interdependent as well, and so we see, and there are lots of examples of this in terms of, you might think a little bit about an example of something that happened across the world that impacted you or someone you knew. We're concerned about a tsunami warning happening after an earthquake in Japan because of the nuclear, potential nuclear disaster that then will affect much more than just the region, as one example. And then, of course, we see, as I said, the being able to sell much more quickly across the world, to move commodities and raw materials across national borders. All of this has sped up and has kind of increased the impact of globalization. Does anyone want to share, before I move on, any kind of examples, either in your own life, how you've been affected by globalization, or ways that communities have been impacted? Okay. Well, I'll keep going, but please raise your hand whenever you have comments, because I'd love hearing from you. Let me see if okay. Next slide. So originally, globalization in the 1990s was very controversial. And there were protests. You've probably read the protests at Starbucks in Seattle, sort of this iconic WTO meetings that were protested, and this backlash as if globalization was a thing that could be stopped. And so this is the Secretary General of the WTO at the time, Pascal Lamy, who was sort of saying, this is not something that we can stop. It's dominating our era, but it's creating this increasingly fragile dominance. It's this thing that is so pervasive, but it's very fragile. And so, he said that even as global integration delivers these enormous benefits we see, we're seeing growing wealth in countries that have been stagnant, spreading technology. We see that billions of people in the developing world have been able to move out of poverty. There are also these new risks: financial instability, economic imbalances, the environmental stresses, growing inequality, we've certainly seen that over the last, particularly the last 15 years, cyber penetration and everything that that does. So we have these risks, he's saying, that are difficult to manage. Moving on, so from this, the kind of first protests against the rapidly accelerating globalization we saw at the end of the 20th century, there's been this new view, alternative globalization, which was, let's at least make this more humane. And again, please raise your hand if you want to join in with examples or questions or contrary views. So we have this idea that, you know, globalization affects different sets of people differently. It's not a balanced process for sure. I found this interesting. The World Council of Churches from 1998 to 2006 met each year at least once in a different part of the world to discuss the impacts of globalization on its work in the church and also in its congregations. And so from Zimbabwe at the first meeting, the policy paper the World Council of Churches put together on globalization said the following. In Zimbabwe, some women have resorted to cross-border trade. This has had its own social and cultural repercussions. Children are left out of parental care, and the number of rape cases on young children has become an alarming cause of concern. You know, children no longer sitting around the fireplace in the evening to listen to stories that promote the values of respect, integrity, peace, love, and unity. Instead, you know, men, women, and children are all engrossed and embroiled in the struggle for survival, the struggle to get a meal, at least for the day. So this is this, you know, this stark contrast around what globalization is doing to our values and to the ability and sort of placing everyone into, as she was pointing out, she said the dogma of the primacy of the free market. And so this is an alternate view of globalization, kind of calling for a more humane way to sort of support these interdependent economic systems. Again, let me see. Good. All right, moving on. Like I said, we're going to have lots of discussions and debates, and you'll be able to say, you know, in our November cohort, we had many positive views of globalization, and I'll be interested because there are, you know, the benefits of technology, things being more convenient, being able to learn more about different cultures and meet different people and have a richer perspective. Someone mentioned an expanding consciousness. And so it'll be interesting as you kind of think about how globalization is affecting the communities and the schools where you are placed over your fellowship. You know, what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks that they are experiencing? This Latin American view of globalization, I'm going to just go very quickly over this. This is Uruguayan writer Eduardo Galeano, who just died in April 2015. His book, his seminal book, Open Veins of Latin America, was really about sort of against globalization. He argued that colonial masters had drained Latin America of natural resources, and then sort of, I guess in 2014, 2015, Galeano then disavowed some of the arguments he made back in 1971 when he originally wrote this book, saying that actually Latin American citizens have benefited overall from globalization, and that Latin American citizens, to some extent because of this, have been forgiving of their colonial and as he said, neo-colonial tormentors. So even just the response around his book and the words that he said before he died have been controversial. You know, there's a lot that we could discuss here, but if you have a chance to just look it up, it was interesting for me to learn more about the Latin American views of globalization through the lens of this sort of iconic writer. Again, just raise your hand if you want to make a statement. I want to move on to quickly to some attitudes around globalization. This is from the Pew Global Attitudes Project. And hold on, wait, I have to expand my notes. Here we go. So in 2007, this Pew Global poll revealed that in many countries there is a strong and growing concern around the rich and poor. And so this is, you know, we have seen a rise out of poverty in many, many, many countries in the world. But this inequality is a theme, you know, not just for America and for the West, but in many, many countries today. Has anyone kind of seen this firsthand in some of your travels? And I'll start with an example of my own. I know when I mentioned Tajikistan before, when I was first there in 1995, it was, again, Tajikistan had just come out of the Soviet Union, so there was still a general equality economically because of the system it had emerged from. And when I went back, I had been back a few times, but then I took a 10-year break and was back in about 2007, 2008, and I was absolutely shocked. At one, there were cafes and there was retail and there were fountains, and it was sort of almost Dushanbe, you know, in some ways had these amenities that were shocking to me. But there was also this tremendous poverty that I had not seen before. And that, for me, that was just so striking to, you know, to see that change in just a decade. Any comments or stories? Oh, good. Ella. Hold on. I'm trying to unmute you. Good.
Did it work?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, I just, something came to mind, a story from when I was living in Guyana last year, and I was living in a village of Nadia, and there was some extreme poverty there, students living far in the bushes, they would say, without running water or electricity. They used solar panels for just a few hours a day. And then one time when we were in town, the capital, Georgetown, we actually met the former president of the country and were invited to have dinner at his house, and we did, which was kind of a whirlwind and exciting, but also very, very stark differences from the people that I was living with in Nadia, in that he had a swimming pool, colored lit swimming pool, a giant marble slab carving from China that he had imported in his hallway, just very ornate, very expensive things that I wouldn't even expect to see in a rich American's house were in his home. And so that it was just really interesting to see those huge and stark differences within a very small population in Guyana.
Yeah, that's an amazing example. What a fascinating country. Yeah, I think that's extraordinary to see how some people are living and very close proximity to others. Thank you. How about Raphael? There. Oh, wait. Apparently I'm not as good as Matthew is at the unmuting. Matthew! Can you unmute Raphael?
Raphael is
do it?
unmuted. Raphael, there you go.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
great, thank you. Yes, going back to knowing that I'm from Baruca, Costa Rica, I went there during my college years, and then I went back several years later. And before I left, I noticed that they had a little hut that they were going to start building, and it was going to be some development, sort of tourism kind of thing. And when I came back, it was amazing to see that they had not only developed a huge hut for tourism, but one single family had pretty much taken over the whole tourist thing. So you had to meet with them, and then they would show you the best mask makers, but the mask makers were part of the family. And if they gave tours or where you could sleep, it would be part of the family. So I saw the good side and the bad side of sort of this globalization impact in this particular small village. And I could say that the people that were still poor, not connected to the family, were still very poor. However, this one particular family kept doing very, very well, and that just shows the pros and cons. That's my example.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a great example, Raphael. Thank you. Because I think, you know, if you take that one example sort of to a macro perspective, I'm going to give my own opinion, but, you know, there's this kind of growing sense of fear. I think we also kind of sense in like I said, in this water we're swimming in, and often because, you know, who has the assets, who has the capital, who controls the means to move those things, there's great opportunity, you know, the tremendous opportunity, and more and more opportunity and control come with that, and in a way it's like this race to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. As you mentioned, this family was assertive and moved quickly, but then once they have that control of some of those systems, it's difficult then to wrest that away. And so I think we'll also see that at a macro level as well. And in fact, and I'll talk about this with the rationale for why WorldTeach did this, but we're, you know, as we talk with ministries of education around the world and hear from volunteers who have been working in public schools, we see increasingly that, you know, governments of countries see that in order to compete today in the global marketplace, the citizenry has to be very educated, and human capital becomes more and more important, and it's almost a race. And so I think your example is really telling from different levels as well. Let's hear from Devin. Hold on. There.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. So the first time I was in Ecuador was 10 years ago as part of a high school learning and service program. And so when I was there 10 years ago, there was the old airport, which has since been turned into a park. And now we'll be arriving in the new airport. So that's a small I guess, example of globalization. I don't know if that's more of an example of necessary infrastructure improvements, but I think the new airport was necessary due to the gigantic influx of tourists into the country. And I was there again in 2013, and that's the first time that I flew into the new airport, and I think they even had to build like a new road. So that's just kind of the impact of the international community on Ecuador.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And also that's a great segue to our next slide, which is about environment and culture, because you mentioned that the old airport had been, that's nice, they made it into a park. That Pew poll that I mentioned found a really strong upsurge in global environmental concerns. So in Latin America, Europe, Asia, the number of people rating environmental problems as one of the top 2 dangers facing the world has increased significantly. And the other danger they mentioned was this, what we were just talking about, the rising inequality between rich and poor. So, you know, I think particularly in Ecuador, it's going to be very interesting to learn more about how globalization is affecting the very beautiful environment there, both, you know, how can the environment be protected, preserved, and also how are people making money from it, and how are jobs being created, and then also, you know, as we see what, you know, in terms of the Amazon forest basin and that very, very rich resource, very unique resource, how is Ecuador handling that when at a time when the price of oil over the last couple of years has decreased so much that has greatly affected the Ecuadorian economy, and it's trying to figure out how does it leverage this natural resource while protecting it as well. So if you have a chance to learn a little about that, it's truly, truly fascinating, and a great example of this tension between, you know, rapidly accelerating globalization from an economic perspective and what's happening with our environment, and as we see with climate change and environmental problems happening in places where the economy is really heating up. Culture is another one. We are going to spend some time during the fellowship talking a little bit about what's happening to indigenous culture, traditional culture as a result of globalization. And also a new culture, you might say, or a mega culture that's being created that's at the kind of global citizen level. So any of these areas are going to be great areas for touch points for your research and reflection projects, and we'll have some time to talk about that. I want to do a quick activity, and I am going to, let's see, we're only going to be able to take a couple of volunteers because it will take too much time to hear from everyone. But if you could just look on the slide that lists a number of areas. So these are different areas or kind of lenses into globalization. I just mentioned this the hegemony of culture. I have a hard time saying that word. Global brands versus local preferences, for example. If you can think about an example of that kind of brings that in a concrete way forward for the group, if someone wants to speak about issues of gender or, as I just said, balancing protection of environment with economic growth and employment needs, these are all different examples of the way that the challenges that globalization brings. And so just think a moment about any examples that you might want to share for any of these areas. And this includes Lindsay, Elizabeth, Liz, Matt, if you'd like to kind of illuminate one example from your international experience, we would love to hear from you. Let's hear from Sean. Thank you. Yes, good, you're unmuted.
Hey, great. Yes, I was thinking about the free trade versus fair trade. And I know a lot of times during this topic, there's an expectation for the suppliers to kind of do things that are we're moving towards an idea that fair trade is better for environment and for the individuals pursuing that. But a lot of times, a lot of that comes from the demand and thinking about how we as purchasers and the idea that cash is king can really start to promote that in our own societies first, so then that the suppliers start changing. So not only thinking as the duty of the suppliers, but also thinking how we on the demand side can change as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's yeah. Thank you, Sean. I'm glad you brought up. The trade is hugely important to understand and can be confusing. Nicole.
So I was going to talk about the global brands versus local preferences. And when I was in Guatemala doing some grant work, I lived in Santiago Atitlan on the lake, and what you were seeing was the people that were, considered mestizo were wearing global brands, and then the more indigenous people who identified more with the indigenous population were wearing the traditional traje. And it sort of was like a class thing, but also, who is really paying attention to their roots. And so there was some conflict even in my host family because the father's mother was very indigenous and wore the traje and all that. And mother in my family, she decided to wear more global brands. And so there was always a little bit of conflict between them because they're trying to be more mixed, and so that was just something that I saw there in Guatemala.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even just, that speaks to sort of your values changing and the fight for identity and within a family. That's really fascinating. I think Lindsay will be a good resource for sure, given her, as she mentioned, her 2 years of graduate work focusing on indigenous language, but also her time in Ecuador to sort of sort out how this is playing out in various places in Ecuador. And then we'll also have people speaking to you from our board and our network around some of these topics. It's a great example. I'm going to take one more. This is from Jennifer, and then we'll move on. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to talk about gender, and I think a lot about linguistics. So one thing in southern Brazil that I've noticed during my Fulbright, my coworker and my friend and colleague is a male and I'm a female, and we've had very different interactions in this culture, where even though my background is in language teaching and my coworker's background is in chemistry, a lot of the community and staff asked my friend for how to lead classes and lead discussions because he was male in the culture. And just one other thing with gender, where a lot of women tend to make commands in more indirect or passive styles, and in this culture that's understood as weakness or as insecurity, and so I've had to work a lot on that this year.
Oh, yeah, that's so fascinating. That's good that you've been aware of, I mean, we're going to talk more about this, but just the issues, how culture is impacting, one, you're in another culture, and the culture itself, the place itself is undergoing these shifts and changes, and so figuring out how to navigate that is part of why, doing this kind of work is really important, because it's difficult. But that's a great example. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, just to move us along, because you don't want to just listen to me talk about globalization all day, I want to quickly just spend a couple minutes talking about why WorldTeach has launched this fellowship, and then a little bit about the fellowship itself, and then we're going to move on to Matthew. So some of you have already been involved with WorldTeach, and you know this, so WorldTeach was established in 1986 at Harvard University. It's an independent Massachusetts nonprofit now. About 15 years ago it spun out of Harvard, but we still have very strong ties. And the founder is a Harvard economist named Michael Kremer, and he's still very involved as the chair of the board. And he's brought a lot of some wonderful colleagues from both inside Harvard and other universities on the board and into our network. And so it does give us this ability to tap some great minds about some of these issues that we've just been talking about. WorldTeach, as I said, has been serving in local schools in 25 countries for the last 30 years. And so we've had 7,000 alumni, some of you who are on the call today, who have experienced, what is happening in education in this particular community or island or city. And we have been hearing some very common themes across the years and across the country borders that have that I think give an interesting perspective on education. And so, as I mentioned, as many of the, why would a government actually invite volunteers in from another country to work in their schools? Well, we know one, English is, as we call it, the de facto language of trade. It's a really important language in the global marketplace. Not the only one, but it is a very, very important one. And many governments want their citizens to be fluent in English in order to be able to participate, as I said, as one of the first movers in global market opportunities. Excuse me. And then we also see that while there's a lot of rhetoric around 21st century learning and student-centered education across many different governments, we also see that the reality on the ground is not always matching that rhetoric, to put it mildly. And that's for a host of different reasons that depend on the context, the local context where you are. But we've seen this hunger for student-centered pedagogy and a greater value placed on that. At the same time, the continuation of rote learning, authoritarian, the teacher as the authoritarian in the classroom. I'm making huge generalizations right now. This is not always the case, of course, but excuse me, but it is a theme we continue to hear. Things are starting to shift as we see more and more educational administrators from around the world able to work in different places and see things being done differently and bringing these great ideas back to their home schools, and so WorldTeach is a part of that movement. But we're really interested to have, you who will be working inside a school for up to 30 hours a week, to connect some of what you're seeing on an individual student basis, family basis, community basis, to some of these macro trends. And one, we're interested to learn about this, but also we think it's an important skill set for you to be able to be inside a place, to understand while you're in the moment, to be able to make connections to macro trends. Again, these are happening really quickly, the world's changing quickly, and your ability to understand, both empathize with what's happening locally, but to understand it in the context of what's happening globally is something that is difficult to do, but highly valued in the world. And so we're excited to help support you in that process. If we move to the next, hold on. Yeah, no, actually I'm still on that slide before, Liz, sorry. I gave you so we're still in the rationale. I just want to mention this idea of the kind of ownership of your own insights and work, and we'll talk more about this, but as you're doing your research and reflection projects, this is your own work, and it's to support your career goals or academic goals. So this is, this could be contributing to a portfolio that you would use to apply to graduate school, or, you might write your memoir, if, as I think Cheryl was saying, some of us are later in our careers, it may be something that you want to show a potential employer. That's all your own work. However, you'll be writing summaries and essays of your insights, and we will be collecting those from the collective insights and the common themes that we identify. WorldTeach will be writing something about, this is kind of what WorldTeach overall sees from the fellowship, what the themes that it has learned. And that's the piece that, WorldTeach would sort of have. So I just want to be really clear that everything that you develop is yours, obviously, and we want it to be focused on what will make sense for your next steps after the fellowship. Cheryl, you have a question here? Let's see. There.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I was looking at that last bullet point as someone who's worked in community development and is very connected to the environment from many angles. I see this additional fellowship theme, environmental, and I wanted to make sure that you covered that, what that meant for WorldTeach.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes. So I think I want to make sure that I've covered these. Okay, good. I've covered. I'm actually like Lindsay. I'm also sick, so I'm making sure that I'm able to keep my mind sharp with you. Let's see. Okay, good. So I think we've covered all the other pieces. So let me move to your question, the environmental. So Ecuador is definitely the first place we're launching this Global Education Fellowship, and we want to move the Global Education Fellowship to other countries. So ideally then, as an alumni of this fellowship program, you would also have other fellow alumni that you'd be able to connect with who have done this similar exercise in other countries, which I think is going to be really extraordinary. We also are designing a global environmental fellowship, and part of this comes from the fact that WorldTeach has been operating in what you could call kind of front lines of climate change for many years. So we have, we're in the Marshall Islands, in American Samoa, and the Federated States of Micronesia, for example. And, those are places, the small island nations are having a strong voice in the United Nations and in the COPs, in the climate change talks in Paris, Morocco, because of the way that they're being impacted by global warming, climate change, and et cetera. So WorldTeach volunteers have gotten increasingly involved in environmental activities as they've been alongside their teaching in schools, not just in these places, certainly in Ecuador, in Colombia, in Costa Rica. We have a summer program focused on this in India now. And again, this is to sort of be able to draw from the experiences of our volunteers who are concerned about the environmental challenges that they are seeing their communities, schools, host families facing, and to provide a little more structure for them to connect to some of the macro trends. It will not launch yet until earliest this summer. Any questions about that? Let's see. Let me see if anyone has any more questions. Okay, great. Okay, now if you have any, let me see. No? Okay, good. Now we can move to fellowship flow. So you'll start your orientation with your arrival in Ecuador on December 7th. And then Matthew's going to be talking a little bit more about your getting you ready for your teaching placements, the online TEFL certification, and then the learning modules, which will be, because you'll be spread out in the country, they will be happening like this through webcast and podcasts and reading we're going to be asking you to do. Those will start in January. We're going to ask you to provide sort of your area of focus for your research and reflection project by early March. And we will provide feedback on that. We have Matthew who's a graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and also kind of has a partnership with current students, and we have a system for them to provide you feedback on your focus area, as well as Matthew and I. And then you'll be working on your research and reflection project in April, May, and June. Again, Matthew's going to give a little more information on this, but we've structured this so that you can express the results of your project in a really a customized way that's going to make sense for you. So if you like writing reports, that's fantastic. PowerPoints, that's all good. If you want to do something, you know, a visual interpretation, you want to do spoken word, you want to do sort of a media presentation, we're really open to how you deliver it, as long as there's also one, there needs to be at least one kind of written companion piece that so that we have some sort of standard way to look at everyone's insights. You'll be preparing your final project in July and presenting those. We're not sure if July 22nd is going to work, but that's sort of the last full weekend before you leave your teaching placements. And so we'll announce that date as soon as we can. But around July 22nd, we're going to have a big celebration and kind of presentation of your projects, and with some great people in country. And then you'll be going back home and connecting, if you'd like, with a career mentor through the WorldTeach Alumni Network in August and September. There's another piece to the fellowship which I'm going to spend more time on, which is this intercultural development piece, and I'm going to be talking about that later today. So, and this is a lot, I know.
Some questions.
Yeah.
We did have
Great.
a question come in asking, acknowledging that there is a lot of this portion online, or being written through the project and the professional development modules each month. And so one person asked if they'll have access to computers being provided for them.
We are not able to provide technology, although in many of the places where you will be, there are internet cafes. Often you can use your phone, but yeah, we don't have the resources to provide computers to fellows. So you'll have to let us know if that's an issue so that we can figure out an alternative for you, or we can help you. Matt, anything else to say on that?
No, the monthly presentations will be done via the internet. So either going to an internet cafe for the time being, or having a place where you can access internet is how we'll be doing the monthly learning modules. So you may want to bring your own computer in order to do that, or find additional alternate arrangements to make that happen. You may or may not have internet provided in your home. A lot of our current placements in Ecuador around similar regions have access to internet on their phones, and so that's a pay-as-you-go model. And so part of it may be going to internet cafes and things like that. So I hope that that answers several of the questions that came in about internet access and computer access.
Yeah. And Lindsay, or Elizabeth, do you want to say any more about internet access in Ecuador?
Yeah, I think just to echo what was said, we unfortunately cannot guarantee that all host family placements will have internet. Some might, but some might not. But all of you are going to be located very close to hub cities, which will have internet cafes at reasonable hourly rates. And oftentimes, excuse me, you can use their computers and headsets if you are to do a webinar or something of that model.
But that's, yeah, these are great points, because we'll need, actually we're just working on the January date for the first webcast, and Lindsay, you and I will talk, but we want to make it for a time when people would have, you know, would have some time at least to be able to get to a cafe so that they can participate. Any other questions before we move on? I've gone a bit over my time, and we still have 2 other sessions to do. Any other questions before we close this session? And Matt, I don't know if you want people to take a quick break now, or wait until after yours.
I think raise your hand if you need a break right now. I think that's probably the best. Raise your webinar hand. That's probably the best way for us to gauge this. Otherwise, we'll just go straight through. And I'm not seeing any webinar hands raised. So it looks like we're just going to go straight through onto the next presentation. So
great. And feel free to, everyone, thank you. Feel free to just do what you have to do. Since we have you on for 3 hours. Thank you so much for your participation. That was great. Okay, Matthew, over to you.
Great. So I am going to switch over the presentations real fast as I do that. Again, my name is Matthew Williams. I'm the Director of Education here at WorldTeach. I've been at WorldTeach as the Director of Education for about 2 years now. And I began with WorldTeach in 2009, 2010 as a volunteer myself in the volunteer program with students in American Samoa in the South Pacific. I had a great year there, and that really helped to change my trajectory in education from domestic towards more international focus. And as Karen said, I graduated from Harvard University with a master's in international education policy, and have gone on to work in government as well as local education, and now I'm working with you all here internationally. So I'm excited to be able to be with you throughout this year of your fellowship, and looking forward to the additional things I can learn from you through your projects and your experiences in Ecuador. I'm also excited to be going to Ecuador for the first time to work with you on your orientation. So we'll be learning about the culture together, and hopefully we can work on expanding our educational expertise and how we can best connect with students through 21st century skills. And so we'll quickly go over the expanded role of learning in the 21st century during this time. And so I will share my screen. There you go. I hope you all can see this. Again, if you have questions, feel free to raise your webinar hand and we'll stop, or I won't be able to answer questions in the question box right away, so I'll come back to those if you have them. But feel free to type them in.
And Matthew, now that I actually see where the questions are now, so I'll also monitor it for you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know there's quite a few of us on here. There's about 28 of us. But I really do think it's important for us to think about what we're most excited about and in the classroom and what we're most nervous about in the classroom, whether we've been veteran teachers for 20 years to this being our first experience in the classroom. We're probably excited about things and nervous about things. So I'd like to just take a moment for you to reflect on what you're excited about in the classroom in Ecuador and teaching, and what you're nervous about. And then I'm going to call on a couple folks that raise their webinar hands to engage in this to let us know. So after you've thought for a moment, if you'll raise your webinar hand if you'd like to speak, and we'll give everybody just about 30 seconds. All right, Amaris. Amaris, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. So if you'd like to type in your...
Wait, can you hear me?
Now I can. Great.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, one thing I'm most excited about and nervous at the same time is developing a rapport with the students. It's something that I always like doing, but sometimes it can be a challenge. It's something that does come naturally, but at times you do have to be a little bit strategic on how you get to know your students. And so it's something that I'm excited about, but also, a bit nervous, like how it's going to go once I get there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to see how you can connect with your students. And I think that's one thing that I've seen throughout WorldTeach's participants is that ability to create connections with individuals within their communities and classrooms really do help to grow the experience of our participants as well as the impact that they have in their community. So I'm looking forward to seeing you do that. And I'm going to call on some folks now. You may not have, but I want to hear from some folks that haven't spoken yet. So I'll give people just one more second to raise their hand if they haven't spoken. Otherwise, I'm going to call on Paige.
And we have Amy too, Matthew, who's new.
Paige and then Amy. So Paige, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And if you'll tell us one thing you're most excited about in the classroom and one thing that you're nervous about in the classroom. And Paige, you're muted yourself, so if you want to unmute, then you can speak with us. Paige is still muted, so we're going to go over to Amy. Amy, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, awesome. So I think I'm most excited about just to feed off the energy of the kids. I'm kind of nervous because I'm not sure exactly what age I'll be working with because I've only really worked with little kids. So I guess I'm really nervous about how many students I'd have and I guess how I would be able to kind of control the classroom, just because I know even though I do speak Spanish, it is kind of limited. And so I guess language barriers and trying to get across and connect with the students that way would probably be my most nervous endeavor.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. I know in my own teaching experiences going into places where I didn't know the language at all, trying to teach in the classroom. I was very nervous about how I would do classroom management. And we have a couple sessions on that during our orientation to help us learn some good tools to to sort of approach classroom management in these English language learner situations. So hopefully we can help alleviate some of those nervousness concerns that you have. And Paige, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And you're muted, so if you'd like to unmute yourself, there you go.
Hey, thank you. Hey, I'm a little bit nervous and concerned about the curriculum we'll be teaching in the classroom. Will it be provided for us, and what will our first day look like?
Yeah, Paige. So you will have a basic curricula that we'll be following that comes from the Ministry of Education in Ecuador. So it's the standardized curricula that they have, and we'll be going into classrooms that hopefully have already had the year planned out. And so we will be having curricula that we can teach from, and hopefully textbooks as well. And then we'll be doing lesson plans around that. And so part of our time in orientation will be looking at that curricula and sort of planning out our first week. You know, like I said earlier, that connection with the students is really important. So we tend to focus on building community within our classrooms at the beginning, and so we'll go over our first day and first week agendas together during orientation and sort of help walk through some of those things that can help do that. And then we'll be going over the curricula together if you have questions. So hopefully that alleviates some of your concerns, but also gives you something to be excited to look forward to during orientation. So that's all the time we have for our introductions. Thank you all for participating, and I hope that we've alleviated some of your concerns in giving you some things to look forward to. So now we'll go into the expanded role of learning in the 21st century. For hundreds of thousands of years, children educated themselves through self-directed play, exploration, and observation. Survival skills were passed on in the form of imitation. With the development of language and stories and poems and fables, these were passed down by tribal elders by word of mouth. Children were encouraged to repeat the tales until perfect, and tests existed in the form of initiation rites. Strength and ability were assessed in trials that reflected real-life challenges. With the introduction of a literature culture, though, from the Romans, the knowledge began to become recorded on scrolls and wax tablets. So formal education arose for both religious and secular reasons. We can fast forward to the rise of the Industrial Revolution era and the need for more technical skills. A formal version of the learning by example tradition was introduced in the form of apprenticeships. And the Industrial Revolution also led to the growth of cities. In the 1900s, with the introduction of the assembly line, schools began to model the workplace, even going so far as to use a bell like ones used in factories. Many of you have probably had that sort of experience while you were in school yourselves with the shift change in classes. So today, there is a need to shift from the industrial-style classrooms of the industrial age to meet the needs of the information age to model behaviors needed for 21st century learning and a globalized economy. So what are 21st century skills? Professor Fernando Reimers at the Harvard Graduate School of Education leads a comparative research project looking at the practice of 21st century education in different nations. He points to a report produced by the National Research Council, authored by Hilton and Pellegrino, that identifies what is known today about the skills that most matter to individuals. And you can find that online. They classified those skills in three different areas: cognition, or the knowledge and cognitive processing, innovation, and creativity. The second is self-knowledge, containing reflection and drive. And the third is relational skills, or the capacity to relate with other people. The Global Education Initiative has looked at the existing frameworks and found that there is an 80% consensus. Not everyone will agree, but for the most part, people do agree on what matters and what skills are needed in the 21st century. So I'd like to open up a question to us and to take just one moment to think about the question before I click on folks to respond. But what skills are students going to need after they're done with school in order to compete in the globalized market? And we can think about personally in your lives, or you might want to think about your students in Ecuador specifically and what skills they may need to participate in their economy in the globalized market within their own communities. So what skills will students need after they're done with school?
May has her hand up, Matthew.
All right.
And Cheryl.
May, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, but you're muted yourself, so if you unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear.
Hi. I think the first thing that comes to mind would be to complement education would be interpersonal skills, the ability to relate to others, both not just verbally but also be able to read, I guess, the non-verbal cues as well. I think that's a very big thing that would come across, I think, in the workplace.
And May, what kind of jobs might that be useful for thinking about the workplace? Do you think that that would transcend among all professions, or?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a universal. I think because it always gets said to us, it's it's not just about what you know, but who you know, and being able to relate to people, being able to feel comfortable in being wanting to relate to people is a big thing, and I think language is a big part of that. Feeling comfortable in yourself to be able to put yourself out there and connect.
Yeah, thank you. And then Gabrielle?
Hi. So I think that one of the biggest skills that graduates need nowadays is just knowing, I guess, further on May's point, and how to network and communicate and connect. One thing that the school I work at now does, which would be a really cool tool to have in most schools around the world, is a really large school community around the world. We have like this digital map that enables students at the school and alumni and teachers to show where they are located in the world at the moment and offer educational support, or sometimes if they have connections at the schools in their communities in their country that they're living in, they connect with the school I'm working at now, and the classrooms hold seminars together and learn from one another. And to have that network grow from a young age and to after you graduate, I think is really important.
And what about for those students who maybe won't be graduating from high school and will stay in their local communities? Do you find value in that sort of 21st century skills?
I mean, I think it's valuable just to learn from as many people as possible. I guess when it comes to what they want to do in their communities for the following years, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that one more.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think, part of that 21st century labor that Karen had talked about in the previous presentation was, labor and human rights and things like that in the labor market. And we do see a lot of tourism popping up all over Ecuador, and the need for English is really great, but also the need to identify different cultural norms. So if I'm selling my local wares to individual tourists that are coming in, knowing their cultural norms and which countries they're from will be really beneficial to what I'm doing in my sales.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that what you're saying really does hit home for a lot of folks, even if they're not maybe continuing in their education beyond the elementary or secondary levels.
Yeah, agreed.
And Cheryl, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, no, I'm here.
Would you like
Yes.
to...
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. You know, because I've worked in cultural heritage and in tourism development for 12 years at the community level, and I'm in Hawaii, which has been undergoing a cultural renaissance. One of the things that I look at as self-knowledge, and very much this program, is that people need to take pride in their own roots and heritage first, and realize that as they move into the global market, if they don't have that awareness and appreciation for where they've come from culturally, they will lack an authenticity to be able to be, you know, a cultural communicator. And that's a very important skill, and I think it gives people a sense of, you know, we bring something to this. It is not stepping up to globalization and then finding, you know, that it's a two-way street. You know, it's not what people bring from their indigenous communities and their backgrounds is as relevant as what the global market is bringing to them, if not more so. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I think that's very well said. And in my own experience in reservations in the United States, as well as marginalized communities abroad, I think that that's very important to send to our students, no matter where they're from, is that their voice matters, and they can participate in this globalization without losing themselves. So thank you. And then our last one, Raphael, do you still have something that you'd like to add? Raphael, you are muted, so if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, I also agree that it just pretty much is, you know, transcending a message that they do matter, that the students matter, regardless of circumstances. And I would just add that teaching them to write is probably the most vital thing, regardless of anything else, because that can then translate into self-expression. And they can internally express that regardless if they can talk or not or speak the language, if they can write. That allows them to do that. That's all.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, these are all really good points. I'm going to recap just a little bit of things that we've talked about to give us some common language around it. So some of the skills that have been identified are critical thinking, collaboration and teamwork, creativity and imagination, problem solving, flexibility and adaptability, global and cultural awareness, information literacy, leadership, civic literacy and citizenship, oral and written communication skills, social responsibility and ethics, technology literacy, and initiative. And all of these things really do make a difference in the success of our students after their time with us. So it's really important for me that we use our platforms as educators to go beyond just teaching English, that we start to incorporate things like critical thinking and problem solving into our everyday classes. So it's a big calling that we're going to have. And the fellowship is going to enable us to sort of put into practice these 21st century skill development among our students and ourselves while we're teaching and within our communities. So I do want to, again, go over the fellowship and the different parts of the fellowship. We have the project, we have teaching, and the teacher quality program. The teacher quality program is contained within our support as well as what we'll do together in order to build our professional development. And so it includes your online TEFL certification course, which contains written and quiz forms, as well as the orientation. We'll complete the TEFL program while we're in country. There's also going to be learning modules in January through June that Karen's touched on. We'll have selection and feedback on our focus areas around March, So on our project, we'll work to make sure that we are in groups to best support each other in the development of our project content in March. And then we'll have a research and reflection on our topics for April, May, and June formalized. And then you'll prepare your final project by July for feedback, and then our presentation on the final projects and our celebration will be around July 22nd. We're not sure of the date quite yet, but it'll be around that mid to end July period. So the project itself, some of you may have questions around this because it is a very big part of your work that you'll be doing while you're in Ecuador outside of the classroom. And the project utilizes your experiences in Ecuador, your personal research that you'll be conducting, the things that you'll learn from the learning modules, and you'll create projects that demonstrate your knowledge and growth in the key areas of intersection of globalization, 21st century skills, and nationalism. So these projects can take any form, as Karen has said, and they'll be presented in July. So you could create projects that are, research papers if that's your wheelhouse, or artistic displays such as, paintings, a series of paintings, or do a video or documentary or a blog. And all of these presentations will be accompanied by a short descriptive essay and reflection of your experiences and what you learned through the Global Education Fellowship. We'll definitely walk through this, and it will be scaffolded for you throughout your time to help give you checkpoints and feedback on this development of your project to make sure that everybody's able to succeed in what they'd like to develop by the end of their time. But it is very fellow-led, and you will be coming up with your topics and how you'd like to present your topics while you're there. So I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions over the project while we're at this part. And I'm not seeing any hands raised. One thing that you'll notice, there we go. I really do like to pause to give people time to think of their questions, and it's something that you'll be putting into practice in your own teaching, is that giving people time to think and reflect without jumping on to the next thing. So I'm very okay with silence. But Cheryl, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You are unmuted if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, thanks. I tried to type one, but I don't see my keyboard on my iPad at the moment with this software. My question, two things. One is, does the school year end before July, so that month that we're doing a presentation, we're focused on that, or are we still teaching? And the second one is, I guess because of my own arts background and interest, when you say an artistic project, is it possible that we would use some of our community members or students in helping to collaborate on a creative project that might tie into our project theme?
So I'll answer the second part of your question first. So using community members and individuals from your classrooms to help tie in your project, I don't see why not that you could incorporate some of their work into your work, as long as it was known that it would be on display and open for others to see. If you were doing things like video recordings of your students, you'd probably need to work with me to create a waiver for the parents and things like that in order to get that permission in order to use student work outside of the classroom. But we can definitely work together to do that one-on-one. So for all of you thinking about things like documentaries or artistic displays, incorporating your student artwork or things like that into your own is very permissible for the project. Like we said, we want it to be fellow driven. So if this is the route that you'd like to take and incorporate other people's work into your project, but you will be the one presenting it at the end, and you wouldn't have all of those folks there for the most part.
Right. I guess as an example, like a mural project at a school, you know, and that the mural might have a cultural theme to it that would have been, when I say a collaboration, but at the completion of that would something like that.
I think that would be a great way to demonstrate your passions in the arts and still get that community involvement and work on globalization. Now, it would come with some research and things around that and some work that we would do together and scaffold in order to write about that in your reflection. But yes, you could definitely do a mural at your school if you could find the space and organize that.
Okay.
And then the first question you asked was about the school calendar, and I'm going to let Liz answer that.
Hi, Cheryl, and everyone. So that is a great question. In terms of the timeline for the school, the last day that fellows will be responsible for their school is going to be July 27th. That said, many of the fellows will not actually have to participate up to that date in their schools. The last 2 weeks or so are discretionary, and what that is if there are students that need additional help, if there's additional testing that needs to happen, you will assist with that. But you will be responsible to your school until the 27th.
So you won't have time off in order to do the project. You'll be working in the schools full time, but we do scaffold it and give us enough time to work on your projects that we hope that over the 7 months that you're actually in country, that you'll have plenty of time to complete what we set out to accomplish. Are there any other questions around the project?
Matthew, Raphael had a question. Can the project be done in Spanish as a project on linguistics or a bilingual presentation? And I was going to write back, that sounds amazing. I think that there would need to be bilingual so that those of us who don't speak Spanish would be able to understand his results, is my first answer. But I think that a project on linguistics that incorporates Spanish would be really fascinating.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I agree 100%. I think that that would be a really interesting project. I know some people do have a passion for languages and mother tongue language and how language influences individuals' outlooks. But yeah, after your research, definitely incorporating that into your presentations, I think that that would be a really wonderful way to incorporate the local things that you learn. Like Karen said, not all of us speak Spanish, myself included in that round of folks. I don't speak any Spanish, so it's gonna be really interesting to see what you come up with. So I'm looking through to scan, and there's no other questions around the project. Karen, did you have anything you'd like to add about how people conceptualize the project or think about their limitations on the project to the sky is the limit, but we have a specific amount of time to get it done in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest limitation is time. So definitely if you have an idea in mind and you wanted to send your idea to us before early March when we ask for them, please do so, because we can give you feedback on your ideas as early as January. Just know that January, February, and March, our learning modules will provide a little more sort of framework, conceptual framework on these concepts of globalization, 21st century skills, but your project may really, it may already be pretty formed in your mind. So we do want to have a chance to have a little dialogue before you, start your project, just to make sure that it fits in this pretty broad umbrella of this intersection of globalization and student-centered learning or 21st century skills. And so that it makes sense as an overall fellowship, but that can go in so many different directions. And we've heard some fascinating ideas as people were applying to the fellowship that we never would have thought of. So one, we do want to have it be within the framework so that we can all learn together something from this collective work, but particularly we want this to make sense for your career direction. So
yeah,
so find a way to make it work is what I'm saying. We'll find a hook, I think, to make it work, and just remember that it would need to be completed by July, or at least some phase of it needs to be completed by July so that you can have finished work to present that second half of July. And even if you do decide you're going to continue the work in some other form, at least have some concrete module of it completed.
Yeah.
I think that's it for now, unless there are more questions. Yeah.
All right, so that's it on the project. Then for me, as the Director of Education, the most important thing that we'll be doing besides self-growth and reflection is teaching. And teaching is a very important part of the Global Education Fellowship, and it isn't going to be easy. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. We do feel that you'll have all the support from the home office here in Cambridge, as well as from your field staff and fellows on the ground in order to succeed in creating really positive student outcomes. So you'll have 40-hour work weeks in your schools. Karen mentioned 30 of it will be teaching, and then you'll have 10 hours for preparation while you're in the schools and meetings and staff meetings and things like that. But it will be 40 hours in the school. You'll have multi-level classrooms. While we don't yet know which exact grades you'll be teaching, you should be prepared to come in order to teach to different levels. Some students in your class may have never spoken English or heard from a native English speaker, while others may be more familiar with the words. So we'll be working through orientation to help you develop tools in order to approach multi-level teaching within your classrooms. Also, like I said, you may be teaching various grades with different exposure to English, and so just being prepared to understand how to give directions and check for understanding and things like that that we'll be going over during your orientation on teaching. And so just come prepared with questions. Ask lots of questions while we're in Ecuador going over how to teach, and don't be afraid to ask those questions, because there's no such thing as a stupid question, only questions that may not know the answer to, but we'll definitely find out the answers for you. For your teaching, for your support, we have the Teacher Quality Program, which includes these monthly learning modules and professional learning communities. Professional learning communities are where we'll get together each month, and we'll go over the 3 pillars of the Office of Education. Over our 30 years of experience around the world, we've learned that teachers that regularly plan, reflect, and assess their students have stronger student outcomes than teachers that don't. So our professional learning communities are centered around these 3 aspects of our teaching in order to support each other through lesson planning, assessment, and self-reflection. We'll also be having our monthly learning modules with high key speakers from WorldTeach, our board of directors, and the other individuals in the field to help us develop our projects. And you'll have access to teacher quality coordinators. Our teacher quality coordinators are individuals with teaching experience, usually in different countries around the world, and have experience teaching with limited resources that are there to help go over questions you may have on how to do activities or present different concepts in the classroom. You'll also be getting a site visit from your field staff. This usually takes place within the first semester, where they'll talk to you about your community as well as review your teaching practices and watch you teach a lesson. They'll give you feedback and then work with us to see if there's any additional support you need within your classroom that we can do remotely one-on-one with you and myself. So these are the different parts of the Teacher Quality Program, and we're really excited to be able to support you through your time teaching in Ecuador. So additionally, I've said that you will be participating in the Teaching English as Foreign Language certification. For individuals that already have a TEFL certification, this is required due to the short orientation time compared to some of our other program lengths. So you will be required to have this text and quiz format. You'll be receiving an email this afternoon that shows you how to log in, and you can feel free to go ahead and start going through your TEFL online TEFL platform to read some of these things that our volunteers have experienced from around the world and different best practices in teaching English language learners. You'll also be getting access to WorldTeach Net, which is an online resource where we have all of these things for you as far as, you know, best practice essays and modules that you can go through and reflect on, and all of the templates for things like our lesson plans and examples on how to complete a lesson plan, your teacher action plans, which you'll be doing as part of your professional learning communities to help you create SMART goals, things like that that we'll be going over more during your orientation. So you'll be receiving access to those things prior to your departure, and feel free to just go over them, but we will be learning more about them once we get in country. So now is the time for us to ask any final questions about your teaching and education before we take a quick break and go on to Karen's presentation on IDI. So on the screen right now, you can see for teaching questions, we'll have an email that goes to your teacher quality coordinator, and it's masterdeliver@worldteach.org. For your TEFL certification questions or anything to do with the email that you'll be receiving this afternoon to help you log into our online platform in TEFLcert@worldteach.org, and then my email's on there as well for mwilliams@worldteach.org for direct questions that you might feel you need to ask me directly. So that's my contact information, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Karen, how much break should we give right now before they need to be back for your presentation?
Let's do a 5-minute break. I would just, if you're okay with it, I'd leave your computers on, just set them aside. I'm going to start at 1:10 Eastern, so 5 minutes exactly. And the good news is this next session is really not that long, so we'll try to power through and get you to sleep or off to your days, whatever the case may be. So we'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay? Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to start in just a moment. So Liz, when you have a chance, yeah, good, you've got my slides up. Okay, just to keep us on time, I'm going to get us going. And I know some of you are still coming back from the break. But I would love to keep moving because I think May, it's probably the middle of the night for her. We've got folks in Europe too, so we'll keep going. This session is our last session for today, and this is on the intercultural development component of the fellowship. This is an optional component, but I really do think it's also going to be one of the most powerful for you personally. And so it's up to you if you want to participate in this. But once I talk about it, I know you're all going to be really excited to do it. Okay, and Liz and Matt, everyone can hear me, right?
Yes,
we can.
Okay, good. Sorry, I probably got you mid-bite. Okay, so the agenda for this session is, what is intercultural competence? Why is it important? And we're going to talk about this assessment tool that we'll be using called the Intercultural Development Inventory. And then this IDP is the Intercultural Development Plan. And this is something that, like I said, I'll discuss it. It's an action tool for you to use during your time in Ecuador. And then we'll quickly go over the schedule. So to start, what is intercultural competence? So, culture is a really abstract concept. But here's one definition, and there are many. It can be defined as the sum of a way of life, including expected behavior, beliefs, values, language, and living practices shared by members of a society. It consists of both explicit and implicit rules through which experience is interpreted. And so that was from Geert Hofstede. Who's a very famous researcher in the field of culture and intercultural development. So again, you're looking at, what behavior is expected, what is implicit and explicit, how does culture interact with beliefs, values, language, and lifestyles and the way people practice their day-to-day lives, and how are those things sort of influenced by and influencing culture. So intercultural competence then is the ability to figure out how to navigate in a culture that is not your original, your culture of origin or culture of origin. So, what are these knowledge, skills, attitudes that help you to be really effective and appropriate in intercultural interactions. And so this is not just, being able to survive in another place, in another culture. This is really about how are you effective? How can you be maximizing your own impact and reaching your own objectives and helping others reach their objectives by your savvy intercultural strategic behavior, which is it's a very, very difficult thing to do, particularly, and it's not something that just happens naturally. So in fact, there have been studies of study abroad programs and working abroad programs, and the mere fact of going overseas to live and immersing yourself in another culture does not at all guarantee that you will develop in a sort of positive forward momentum, more intercultural competence. And in fact, depending on what happens to you as you're living overseas or in another place, in some ways you can actually become more entrenched in your own culture of origin, particularly if you're not kind of looking at this, reflecting on it in a structured way. These findings are from a study at Georgetown, which I'm sure we'll send to you in one of our learning modules. It's really interesting study of students who studied abroad, and really it was the programs where there was structured reflection, integration of intercultural exercises and concepts into the experience of immersion that enabled people to develop in this way. So we see that there are competencies, there are these key tools and levers. Empathy, I think we all sort of understand that putting yourself in another's shoes and seeing life from their perspective is an important part of developing your intercultural competence. Understanding your own identity as someone who comes from one or more cultures and understanding how culture has affected you is an important part of developing intercultural competence. And there are ways to actually measure your kind of orientation or your progress, if you will, toward increasing your intercultural competence. So this intercultural development inventory, and let me move on. I'm going to explain the IDI in just a moment, but I actually want to talk a little bit about why is intercultural competence valued by employers. So the next slide. So this refers to a global set of data that was, as you can see in the left lower hand box, conducted by the British Council in the USA with Ipsos, which is a global polling firm, and Booz Allen Hamilton. They surveyed 360 hiring managers or recruitment decision makers in 9 countries that are listed in the middle. And they actually were just asking an open-ended set of questions around what is valued by employers who are hiring. And intercultural skills came up in many different ways. It was highlighted as one of the most important set of skills for a potential employee. The ability to understand different cultural contexts, respect for others and others' languages, cultures, behavior, ways of life, and then knowledge of a foreign language. So the great thing is you're going to have the ability to deepen all of these during your time in Ecuador. And of course, as we see more and more, people are having experiences working and studying overseas. And one of the reasons we really wanted to introduce this part of the fellowship to you is that it has sometimes been hard for WorldTeach volunteers to be able to concretely articulate what it is that they, all of the experience they've gained in living in, whether it's Micronesia or China or Morocco, how do you articulate what you've been through and how much experience you've gained during that time? By participating in the intercultural development component of this, for this one element, you'll be able to say, well, when I started the fellowship, I took this assessment. It showed that you don't have to speak, it's your choice how you speak about your own scores, but you can at least explain, I was in a certain place in my intercultural development at the beginning of this fellowship, and I worked in this way, and then at the end, I took the assessment again. I was able to sort of, in a very structured way, increase my intercultural development skills. So this is one, in addition to the personal transformation and how we think this is going to contribute to a more effective interpersonal skill set in your life, it's also a concrete skill set that employers are looking for. And we want you to be able to talk about it in a way that is, not just anecdotal. So the next slide just talks a little bit about the actual behavior sets, the traits that employers value, again, from that same survey. And then the next slide talks about this intercultural development inventory. This is the instrument that we're using. It's really known as one of the gold standards for assessing intercultural development. There are other tools that have been developed, but none that have been tested for reliability and validity, and certainly in a cross-cultural way as much as this tool. And and we won't be able to get too deep into this today because it would take us a little bit off track, but I can provide information on how the tool has been assessed. It's actually been provided to over 10,000 people in hundreds of different cultures and different languages through back translation. This is all important because since it's assessing intercultural development, it's very important that it actually work across cultures and languages. And I think 60 dissertations have used the IDI as the basis for looking at progress along intercultural orientation. So you've got the link there, the IDIinventory.com. There's lots of information about it if you're interested. But this is, if you choose to participate in this, you'll be taking this assessment tool. You'll be receiving an email that will signal to you, okay, you know, you will say, Gabrielle, here's your link to take your IDI. You'll need about 50 to 45, 50 minutes actually to sit uninterrupted and without distractions and be able to move through the assessment tool, and then we will be getting results, I will be getting results back, and then you and I will be setting up a time to talk so that we can go through your results. So the IDI assesses where one falls along the intercultural development continuum. It really celebrates cultural difference as something that is real and happens in the world, and that people have different orientations toward cultural difference as well as commonality between cultures. So I mentioned some of the studies around cross-cultural validity, etc. I'm happy to provide you more information. This IDP, the Intercultural Development Plan, so this is what comes from your unique profile. So you'll take this assessment. I will receive your results, and you'll also get those over email. And then you and I will spend about an hour probably over Skype or WhatsApp call, and we'll figure out how we're going to talk to go through your own results. And then we'll go through this intercultural development plan, which you'll have as your takeaway. It's sort of a big document, and it gives a number of ways for you to work on your intercultural development over the 8 months of the fellowship. So the recommendation is that if you want to make a big leap in your intercultural development, it would actually take about 30 to 50 hours of effort over the fellowship period. Again, you know, if you, perhaps this is something, you know, you want to take the assessment, and then you may want to do a little bit less if you want to spend more time on other parts of the fellowship or teaching or you know, hiking. And then while you're in Ecuador, you can also take the plan and work on it when you get home. But you will be taking another IDI when you return home. So I'll go through the schedule in just a moment, and you can see kind of how this is going to work. You arrive in country, and we want you to take the IDI before you get too sort of immersed in the local culture and in your community. So you'll be taking that before December 22nd, and then it takes a little bit of time for the results to come back, and then we'll be scheduling these Skype sessions. Ideally, we can get these all done before January 31st. So these results that you receive are confidential, and I would actually urge you not to discuss your results with others in the fellowship. You know, maybe you talk about it with your family, and the reason for that is, one, I just want to make a blanket statement that it's most common that people find their results surprising. human nature, and this is proven again and again, that people, you generally consider themselves more interculturally competent than they are, because this is a really difficult thing. And some people, even if you've lived in many countries or had lots of different experiences, it really depends on, it might depend on where you are in your life, if something has recently happened that may have impacted this, or, as I said, if you've never in a structured sort of reflective way been integrated your sort of orientation toward cultural difference into your skill set. So there are lots of reasons why your IDI scores may not be as high as you think, and like I said, this is extremely common. What is not common is that someone gets it back and says, oh my, I'm even better than I thought I was going to be. That's actually pretty rare. So I also would I'd love it if you did not share your results with others, because this is not to judge anyone in any way, and this is really just for you and your own development. And it's sort of like, hey, I got an A on the test, what did you get? And the person saying, well, I got a C+. I mean, again, people are in different stages for all sorts of reasons. So I think I've made that point. This is really for you. So so during our session, you and I will make a plan for you to send sort of an update on what you've decided to work on, how is that going, and then again within the 4 weeks of completing the fellowship, so in August 2017, you'll be taking the IDI again. And it's true, this is a short amount of time to really see concrete movement in terms of scores, but for people who work hard on it and really put their minds to it, we may see some real differences. But also, even you may, I can't go too much into it now because I don't want to say too much about the actual assessment and before you take it, but there may be elements that you say, oh yeah, I really did, I worked on that element and I see that it's changed now. So I think this is just going to be great for you to be able to, if you haven't focused on this part of your life, it's extraordinarily important these days, and we see it in the news and in current events how important it is to be able to navigate, acknowledge both commonalities but also cultural difference. I think that is mostly what I wanted to say. I went through this very, very quickly, so I would love to ask if there are any questions. If anyone and I don't want you, if you've taken the IDI before, I don't want you to say too much about it in order not to bias people's experiences when they take the assessment. But I am curious if anyone has ever worked on sort of their intercultural development or intercultural competency before, or sort of how this is sitting with everyone. Are people interested in participating in this? Are you thinking you might, forego this part of the fellowship? Yeah, just to hear a little bit about what you're thinking. And just raise your hand if you'd like to share. If everyone's fallen asleep on me. Okay, great, thank you. Let's hear from Paige first. Let me unmute you. Good. You should be unmuted in a moment. Hold on.
Paige, you have yourself muted, so as soon as you unmute, we'll be able to hear what you're saying.
Okay, here we go. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, it sounds really interesting, and yes, I'm going to give it a try. I'm all about,
excellent.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
Great, good, thank you, Paige. Good, and how about from May? I think I've unmuted you. Yeah.
Hi, yes, I'm very interested as well, and I think I'll definitely do that. And I think I'll probably be one of those people that will be very shocked as to how low my initial score might be.
And it's not, yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily low, but there are different orientations, and I guess there's an embedded, sort of thought that orientations that are more able to adapt and be effective in other cultures. And then there are orientations that are not perhaps as effective at navigating and, sort of making things happen, being effective in another culture.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Mm.
Great. I know there are some questions, so let me look at those.
We're good on the questions.
Okay, great. Well, this is, so anyone else, I really, I try to pitch it. I do encourage you to take part in this because it is not often that you get to work on this element of your life. And it's not, you'll go to seminars in your workplaces and go to classes in school on this, but being able to actually practice it in real life in another culture while you're living in another culture in a language that may not be your native language is a pretty special experience. So we urge you to kind of make the most of it.
And Karen, Cheryl does have her hand raised. I'm not sure if she has a question.
Oh yeah, let me unmute Cheryl. Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm very excited about this part, I guess, because I have an anthropology degree, but, I think this is one of the more interesting components of the program is how do we ourselves develop the competency to be better global citizens. And, I kind of did my own informal thing last year in trying to really connect with people in my Spanglish, but at a deeper level. But I think that this is so important to how we are going to communicate and be received in this whole fellowship in Ecuador. So it's very viable. I'm excited about it.
Excellent. Good. I agree. Thank you, Cheryl.
And Karen, we have another question asking, is it possible to take the IDI before they arrive in Ecuador?
Today is the 29th, and we could try. We could definitely try that. It's a little bit of a turnaround in terms of this is the IDI group in Maryland has to turn around your test, but since if I just I need to make sure you all have my email. If you email me, or if Matt and Liz, you can tell me who wants to take it earlier, I can send those in, and we can try. Just depends when your flights are and everything.
Okay, and just to show
by the way,
what I'll go ahead and do is I will be sending out a Google form to all the fellows, and if you would like the possibility of doing the IDI prior to departure, you can go ahead and fill out that form just so we have it all at once and I can submit it over to Karen.
Great. We should, so I should try to send that in tomorrow into IDI if possible, tomorrow or the next day. And by the way, my email, I have probably the best email for you to use for me is kgrossman@worldteach.org. See, I should have put that on my thing like Matt did, but it's kgrossman@worldteach.org, and Liz can put that on the Google form too, because you will be getting emails from me about this. If you hear from someone named Kay Doyle at worldteach.org, that's also me. I just use both last names. Any other questions? This is the last session for today, so if you have any questions about the fellowship overall, Liz, Lindsay, Elizabeth are here to answer those questions as well. Otherwise, I know we've had you on for a very long time today, so we really, really appreciate your attentiveness. I want to, one last thing is I notice that I risk doing this. Ria and Ginny, I'm not sure you had a chance to introduce yourselves. If I'm going to unmute you just in case if you're still on. Ria, let's see.
It's Raya.
If you would like to introduce yourself. Raya, thank you. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah. So Raya, if you want to just say kind of where you are and maybe one interesting fact about yourself.
Okay, so I am currently in Wisconsin, but most recently I was living in Tanzania. I think the most interesting fact about myself is once I get to Ecuador, I will have lived on 4 continents this calendar year.
Oh my goodness. That's impressive. Thank you, Raya. Thanks for. And how about Ginny? If you're on still, we'd love to hear from you.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, I am in a very crowded coffee shop right now, and everyone's kind of looking at me. I just heard about the webinar about 12 minutes ago prior to my getting on, so I really apologize. I missed the first part. So I guess I'm living right now in Minneapolis, and prior to the last 6, I've actually been teaching in an inner city school for the last, maybe 4 or 5 months, ELL and English Language Arts, and it's a school that's 95% refugees from Somalia, and a very nervous population right now, which is understandable. And prior to that, I was living in France for 1.5 years. So I'm really looking forward to this experience, and I also plan to participate in the IDI. I think that just sounds very exciting. So again, I apologize for getting on late. I just didn't know about the webinar, so maybe something's, maybe I didn't check or something, so I just don't know. But I wrote Liz that, so I don't know, Liz, if you got that information, you know, or not.
Jenny, thank you. It's you know, we've recorded this, right, Liz? We recorded this for others who were not able to be on.
I did record your email. I went ahead and responded to that. Thank you very much. And for everybody, the session has been recorded. We did not record the initial introductions, however, but all the important informations and sessions that will be useful for you during your fellowship will be sent out by tomorrow morning.
Perfect. Thank you. So Jenny, you'll get the information. Okay, I think that's it for us today, unless there are any last questions. Liz and Matt, are we okay on other questions?
Yeah, there was one question that came in that pertains to everybody, so I'll go ahead and read it out loud about just some logistics around orientation and housing and when folks will be introduced to their awesome hosts, to their awesome sites. So we'll all be together. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone during orientation, and then around the 16th, we'll be departing from orientation to go to sites. So at that time, you'll be delivered to your sites and into your housing situations. So that was the one question that applied to everybody, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that logistics.
Okay, great. Well, we're excited to meet you all. Matthew will be down there in person. I'll be talking to you very soon about your IDI, and you'll be working with Liz as you have been throughout. And then Lindsay and Elizabeth will be taking care of you in country. I really am so happy that you have Lindsay and Elizabeth working with you throughout this time. They're exceptional professionals. And we're, just looking forward to learning with you. So thank you so much for your attentiveness today, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Great, thank you, Karen. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today for the kickoff of the training for the Global Education Fellowship. I look forward to working with you through the rest of the pre-departure process. And Matthew looks forward to meeting you in person in just several days from now. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call at the office or shoot me an email. Otherwise, I will be sending out the recorded sessions by tomorrow morning. And in just a few minutes, you'll be receiving an email with a Google form for interest in the IDI prior to departure. Thank you and have a good day.